the Persephone Foundation, Timeline Archives, Timeline number 006, Cyborgs and Crusaders. The Iran-Iraq War was a victory for the Iranians, and the Iraqi state was destroyed after the Iranians beat them in round 2. By sheer luck, the Japanese economy didn't fall as hard as it did IOTL, and the Asian giant continued on its way. About a decade later, the Soviet Union collapsed more gracefully than it did IOTL. The PRC followed soon after, when the CPC agreed to democratic elections after mass protests throughout the country. September 11th, 2001 is just remembered as the premiere date of Star Wars Episode I, The Beginning. Afghanistan was invaded in 2004, but by Iran, and Pakistan's government all but collapsed after a devastating war with India in 2017. By the 2040s, many things had changed since the 2000s. It was truly the world of tomorrow. Cybernetic augmentations were commonplace, internet ubiquitous, and the moon is starting to be colonized. Nuclear weapons have largely been decommissioned in favor of orbital lasers and railguns, and the manned aircraft of the great powers' air forces have been replaced with drones. Many in the First World have taken a spaceflight to one of many cities in low Earth orbit. Megacorporations are powerful, and in places like Japan, they practically run the state, but the state is still supreme in most places. However, not everything is well. The United States, which entered the 21st century as a hyperpower, was hit hard by an economic recession in the 2000s and 2020s. It disbanded NATO in 2023 after voters became tired of defending Europe. The Patriot Party, a once obscure political party which had trouble even getting into the debates, fed off the growing discontent with the two-party system by proposing a religiously inspired third way of controlling the vices that brought down America. Believing that the economic crises are a result of immoral behavior in the marketplace and in the home, the Patriots proposed reining in a society on the brink. The Patriots made marginal gains in the 2020s, but became a major party by the 2030s. And the only legal party in 2039. From then on, the Patriots made efforts to restore American greatness by challenging the EU and the Japanese-led Pacific Rim Association. The annexation of Canada, conducted after a coup by Patriot sympathizers across the border, almost brought the world to war, as did America's attempt to restore order. By 2044, the United States is a theocratic dictatorship undergoing massive military buildup that concerns the world. The country has been under martial law since a botched assassination attempt against the president in 2040. The assassin's rocket-propelled grenade successfully killed the First Lady and damaged the president's body enough that he has to live the rest of his life as a brain connected to a supercomputer network in Cheyenne Mountain. Hasty programming, a cocktail of experimental drugs, PTSD, and shrapnel have done nothing good for the man's sanity, and his orders have become more ruthless against enemies both real and imagined. Surprisingly, the Americans found allies in the United Kingdom and Russia. The UK was run by the reactionary Phoenix Party, which took power by taking advantage of anti-EU sentiment and a devastating SARS breakout, which it blamed on Islamic terrorists. The Russian Union is run by corrupt businessmen and outright crime lords, and wants to go back to the good old days of Soviet hegemony. The three restorationist powers don't particularly like one another, but they hate the status quo more. The rest of the world has recognized the restorationist threat, but it is still having difficulty dealing with international crises, especially after the UN collapsed back in the 2020s. The EU and the Japanese are leading the charge, although they are having trouble getting the rest of the world to follow them. The Chinese Union still dislikes the Japanese, and is skeptical about what it could gain by being antagonistic towards a major trading partner. The Indians, which joined the Pac Rim Association even though they were nowhere near the Pacific, is trying to become the top dog within the alliance, and this is causing friction with the Japanese. The Brazilians fear the Americans will do something insane. The Iranians are definitely worried about the Americans and their Arab allies, but their poor humanitarian record still puts a wedge between them and the Europeans. The world is on the brink, and it's only a matter of time before someone does something very stupid. Points of interest. Free Mexico isn't. In the Central American Union, agri-corporations get most of the votes. The Americans have put far-right paramilitaries in charge of security. It's really messy. The Brazilians kicked the Americans out so local megacorporations can have the Amazon all to themselves. The military runs things in the Southern Cone, with the Americans constantly looking over their shoulders. Renewed violence has been denounced by the EU, even if the British accused the EU of supporting the terrorists. Most former Belgians are okay with the new Benelux setup. Still suffering from attacks by Russian-backed nationalists who want Kosovo back. The United Arab Republic was founded after the democratic revolutions in the 2010s. Is doing surprisingly well. The Chinese still need their raw materials. The Congolese jungles have devoured more than its fair share of peacekeepers, but it's home to many plant species that the EU's biomedical corporations can't do without. The Israelis think that the Americans are totally insane, but it's better to have them as a friend than as an enemy. Kurdistan, a useful and appropriate place to put Iranian Kurds who are too loud about Iranian Kurdish independence. The Pakistanis looked for better friends after the Americans left them on their own during the war against India. Not exactly a free Tibet, but the complaining has died down. When one of the Kims died without an heir, a nuclear civil war forced international intervention. The South Koreans rather prudently let the Chinese take the country for rebuilding. Only agreed to reunion if it was guaranteed autonomous status. Also think that the Americans are wacky, but are more familiar than the Japanese. This has been the Persephone Foundation Timeline Reading. Thank you for listening. This has been the Persephone Foundation Timeline Reading. Thank you for listening.
Hello? Hello? Phelan, are you... Someone? I'm trapped in